All right. And we'll do it. Okay. Welcome, everybody. My name is Daphne Price. I'm the Executive Director of JOFA. I am so excited to be sitting here with my very good friend, Deborah Band. Deborah is a brilliant artist, a really visionary thinker, somebody who's really applied all of the passions in her life, arts, Judaism, feminism, all into one path. A little bit about Deborah. Deborah Band's work is in Hebrew illuminated manuscripts. She will tell you more about that, and it draws upon her love of both the manuscript art and biblical studies. Deborah holds a BA honors in history from Concordia University in Montreal, where I went also.
Amazing. This is miraculous.
And an MS in political science from MIT, and turned full attention to Hebrew manuscript arts in 1987. Descended from an eminent rabbinic family, her extensive studies of Jewish texts and research into medieval European and Middle Eastern painting and manuscripts inform her work. Her work, celebrated for its intellectual and spiritual depth, as well as visual beauty, includes illuminated and paper-cut books and ketubot, other manuscript pieces and paper cuts in exhibits, private collections, community institutions, and galleries across the English-speaking world. Deborah is the artist and author of The Song of Songs, The Honeybee in the Garden, I Will Wake the Dawn, Illuminated Psalms, and Arise, Arise, Deborah, Ruth, and Hannah. Kabbalat Shabbat, the Grand Unification the Grand Unification, and her first illuminated book for children, All the World Praises You, an illuminated alphabet book, an adaptation of the classical medieval work, Perek Shira. She is presently collaborating with Israeli philosopher Menachem Fish on an illuminated book and commentary of Kohelet. Her work tours museums and galleries across the United States. Deborah has worked with Jewish women's groups across the United States and lectures frequently on her work in America and in locations that include synagogues, Christian seminaries, and the Library of Congress. In addition to her artwork, Deborah has participated in medical ethics review activities at the NIH in Bethesda, Maryland since 2005. Deborah has lived throughout the United States and Canada and presently resides in Washington, D.C. For more information, please see www.dbandart.com. And now I'm going to hand this off to Deborah.
Hello. It's lovely to be with you all this afternoon. Should we bring up the slides?
Sure.
Let's do that.
So we're going to share our screen. And there we go.
And let's
go to the beginning.
Slideshow. Play from start.
Okay.
Yay. We're working. This is another miracle today. I want you to know. So anyway, I have to say, I'd like to dedicate my part of this webinar today to my mother, Josephine Swift Roskis, on her 84th birthday. The fact that she is who she is has a lot to do with what you're seeing today. Now, on Shavuot, we encounter two of our most wonderful stories, the giving of the Torah at Sinai, of course, and then the Book of Ruth. And Ruth is one of my own favorites. And in fact, I spent several years exploring it and its values for our own lives. And my book, Arise, Arise, grew from that fascination. Apart from the poignance of their story, the deep kindness, the hesed, lived by Ruth, Naomi, Boaz, and unnamed others, seizes me every time I read it. Equally remarkable is the lasting importance of the story for all of us. Since Megillat Ruth is also the background story for King David's birth, we understand that its character's overwhelming chesed must be the root of all Jewish life. So let's look a bit at how Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz and other anonymous characters model this crucial value in a few key moments of the story. And then what we like to do is open things up to general discussion for sort of a conversation about chesed in our own lives. First, let's consider the truly cosmic importance of chesed. In Kabbalah, which, standing on one leg, we can describe as the story and mechanics of the flow of God's energy into and throughout the world, chesed is one of the key sefirot, the emanations or qualities of God's energy as it suffuses through and shapes our world. So anyone who spreads chesed, this deep loving kindness, is directly doing God's work, directly improving our world, doing tikkun olam. So now let's move to the story. Interestingly, Samuel, he's the prophet who's traditionally believed to have recorded Megillat Ruth, although actually many scholars suggest that a woman might have written this tale. So it begins with the consequences of an absence of chesed. There we go. Megillat Ruth begins with death. Naomi's husband and 2 sons, the husbands of her daughters-in-law Orpah and Ruth, have all died over the course of the 10 years prior to the story. Why did they die? Text is terse, tells us nothing more than that they did die and that the women were left on their own. However, we soon learn that her husband Elimelech and sons Machlon and Chilion had owned land in Judea near Bethlehem. And during a drought and ensuing famine, they had abandoned their lands, abandoned their community, to move to the traditional enemy nation of Moab, which is roughly modern Jordan. The classical rabbinic commentators on Megillat Ruth thus understand that the men's death was due to their arrogant neglect of their less wealthy fellow Judeans. They simply left for greener pastures, rather than using their resources to care for their community. And their very names convey their guilt. The rabbis interpret Elimelech as, "To me shall the kingdom come." Machlon means blotted out, and Chilion means perished. In contrast, Naomi's name means pleasant and sweet. The Midrash traces a long path of misfortunes, punishing the men for their negligence, modeling it on Vayikra, Leviticus 13 to 14. But pleasant and sweet Naomi and her daughter-in-law Ruth experience a very different fate. As we know, Naomi and Ruth set out for Bethlehem, near the family's ancestral lands. Orpah follows her penniless mother-in-law's urging and returns to her Moabite family. Let's see. I have gotten myself screwed up here a little bit. So, okay. Let's do next slide, please. Okay. Pleasant, sweet, and suddenly destitute Naomi believes she shows chesed to her daughters-in-law when she tells them to go home to their families, since she has nothing to offer them. Orpah, as we know, doesn't argue, and she does just that. Ruth, though, has a different idea about offering chesed to her mother-in-law. In the most famous scene in the book, which you see here, Ruth kneels beside her mother-in-law and, out of pure chesed, pure, faithful kindness, pledges her complete commitment to Naomi. And we all know these words, but I'll read them anyway. "Entreat me not to leave you or to return from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go. And where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. This and more may the Lord do to me, and more also, if anything, that death parts me from you." Now, the imagery that you see here lays out a visual allegory about the depths of the chesed Ruth offers Naomi and its implications for the nation, whom she is unwittingly strengthening through her personal actions. Let's look first at that palmette border surrounding the texts at left. Now, if you remember, in the descriptions of Solomon's temple and palace, there are palm designs mentioned among the decorations. Now, there are zillions of palmette designs all over the southern Mediterranean basin for thousands of years, from ancient Sumer through the Roman Empire and ever after. But this one's special. It's based on a little furniture plaque that lives now in, little ivory furniture plaque that lives now in the Israel Museum. And the fascinating thing about this is it was found in ruins from Shomron, exactly contemporary with the building of Solomon's temple. And we know from art historical studies that that there were standard patterns that were used, there are pattern books that were used for large areas around. So it is a reasonable bet that this very palmette pattern is exactly the one that was used in Solomon's temple. Is that cool or what?
That is very cool.
The used in Solomon's temple and by Rishon, the first temple. And so I use it all over my work, and certainly here, to prefigure our temple, which will eventually be built by Ruth's descendant, David's son, Solomon. Now, look at the painting at the left. You can see flying overhead a stork, a dove, and there are capers springing from the bottom of a palm tree. And all of these relate to Ruth and Naomi's characters. The palm tree is a symbol of righteousness in Psalm 92, the special psalm for Shabbat. The stork is very specific to this story. The word for stork in Hebrew is chasidah, and if you notice the resemblance to word chesed, it's not accidental. So the stork is often used in Midrash as a symbol of kindness. The dove has to do not with peace, not in Jewish terms. It has to do with Israel's compliance with divine will. You can see a golden eagle feather across the top of the painting. And that relates to the Midrash, and it is an eagle feather, and it relates to the Midrash about God rescuing Israel on the shores of the Red Sea, as though al kanfei nesharim, as though on wings of eagles. And there's Midrash that talks about God's providential care for us being like that of the perfect parent. And you'll see eagles elsewhere in here. And there's other stuff going on, and it's in the book, but I'm not going to take the time to go over it now, or else we'd be here for a good long while. So let's move on. Thank you. Okay, now look at the painting on the right. And we can see the two women journeying toward Bethlehem, completely alone in the vast landscape. And as they look toward Bethlehem, you can see that the fields are thick and rich with grain about to be harvested. Now, again, you can see eagle feathers above, alluding to God's parental care, God's own chesed toward the women. At right, we have an entirely different display of chesed. And here, I think we have to read between the lines to really appreciate what's going on. It's interesting to me that this is something that none of the rabbis picked up on, but I think it's real. So Naomi and Ruth, undoubtedly ragged and filthy and exhausted, finally walk in through Bethlehem's gate. You can see that same palmette design inside the doorway. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind that this ragged older woman coming in had followed her husband in abandoning the city in its time of need. And now she's coming back, bringing with her a young woman from a traditional enemy nation. But so you can think about what people might have thought about that. But what does the text tell us? When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole city buzzed with excitement over them. The women said, "Can this be Naomi?" And they actually engage her. The text does not tell us that they shun her, and it doesn't say that they drew back from this Moabite woman she schlepped along with her. So yes, they're surprised, they're even shocked, but there is not a hint of rejection. And I think that must lead us to conclude that they welcome the two. And this is an unexpected chesed. And this painting is full of symbolism about the nobility of their actions. Okay, let's move on. And that's not all. Look to the right here. Other impoverished women of Bethlehem quickly teach Ruth about how she might support herself and Naomi by gleaning in the right barley fields. Here, Ruth has returned home to their lodgings to tell Naomi what's happened and what she's learned. And you can see the woman she's learned from in the foreground. The palm tree symbolizes their tzedek, their righteousness, and the caper, their ability to persevere without God's unseen support. The dove, yes, that's in a little passage in the Talmud Bavli, and I can talk about it later. The dove speaks again to their compliance with God's intent. So altogether, I think we have to understand that the townspeople of Bethlehem received Naomi and Ruth with active kindness and taught Ruth how to survive. And by luck, we're told, Ruth just happens onto exactly the right field. She finds herself on the land of their redeeming kinsman Boaz, who instantly notices her careful deportment and dignity, maybe also her beauty, and inquires about her, and in turn offers his own or begins his kindness to them by making sure that she knows where to rest safely, making sure that she won't be harassed sexually or otherwise by other harvesters, and offers her food and water. Now, there's some really interesting meaning going on relating to the grain of the picture and the micrography, and you'll see these explained in the book. Again, we'd be here for hours if I went through everything. But let me just say, you can see the Hasidah, the stork soaring overhead, signaling Boaz's deepening chesed. Most fun. Thank you. It's also worth pointing out that it's fine for us to take advantage of the chesed offered by others when we're in need. And that's what Naomi tells Ruth here. She effectively says, thank God, Boaz can redeem our lands. Do what he says, stay in his field. And in this painting, as usual, there's a whole allegorical story told, but let me just point out to you that blue carving of lapis-like eagle wings filling in the top of the arch. This motif is based on a lapis carving very, very early from Ur-Kasdim, or the Chaldees in southern Iraq, the Sumerian holy city that was Abraham's home. We, of course, have the tradition of God rescuing Israel at the Red Sea as though on eagle's wings, as I mentioned a moment ago. So this represents God's unseen providential chesed here. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Naomi advises Ruth about how to really catch Boaz's attention and offers him a full opportunity to exercise his chesed. Mm-hmm. And she helps the lovely Ruth dress herself up to go meet Boaz at midnight. And that's just what she does. So let's move on. She indeed surprises Boaz in the middle of the night, camped in the middle of his open-air threshing floor, surrounded by sleeping workers and animals. And there is a lot of debate about the nature of the meeting, of course, but I strongly believe that they were fully clothed and stayed that way. He had already praised her as a virtuous woman, and she simply made it clear in this ritual kind of way that she was throwing herself at his mercy, asking for his chesed. And men are always disappointed when I give this bit. And Boaz does the right thing. He gives her a gift to take to Naomi and sets about resolving the women's dilemma. Cute. So Boaz's chesed now becomes not simply an attitude, but a concrete public action. And there are going to be contracts involved. And at right here, you see a 12th century BCE Paleo-Hebrew script just about contemporary with Boaz's actions. This is taken from the Isbet Sarta Ostrakhan, or potsherd used as, for writing, in the Israel Museum. And it fascinates me because this is just the script that Boaz, if he was literate, that Boaz would have been reading. Here we are. Okay, so Boaz gathers a minyan at the gates of Beit Lechem. City gates were always like the town squares. Everything public happened there. And he also got hold of the man who had first claim on Naomi's lands. We're only told Ploni Almoni, which is, this is that era's version of John Doe. His chesed, lest we get into Lashon Hara here, his chesed toward Ruth and Naomi stretches to include a bit of an exaggeration. Mm-hmm. He convinces this inheritor that redeeming Naomi's land meant marrying Ruth. Just ain't so. Nothing of the kind could in any way be construed by Israelite law. So this nameless guy decides to sign his rights over to Boaz. Marrying Ruth would have complicated his situation. And here you see a painting modeled on the same, or both paintings are modeled on the same kind of cylinder seals that they would have used to affix their contracts. Again, the Israel Museum and lots of ancient history museums are full of these. But in God's own chesed, God rather has played the perfect parent to all the human players in this drama and brought Boaz to marry Ruth, redeem Naomi's land, guaranteeing not only these women's survival and happiness, the proper care of their lands, but also the birth of the Davidic dynasty and Israel's destiny forevermore. And tears transform to joy. Oh, this actually is what I should have been showing you a moment ago. So let's move on. Tears transform to joy, all shaped by hesed, loving kindness, and which is so much a part of all our lives. And I think we would now like to open things up to a more general discussion.
Yeah. So I guess one of my questions, because you've thought about this so in depth, is when Naomi comes back to her community and they're like, Naomi, Naomi, and she says, call me Mara. And they show her kindness by showing her how to glean.
And probably helping them find shelter.
Yes. Well, I was going to say, but it's not clear in the text. Does it not surprise you that they're not more kind to her and not just, let me show you how to glean, but let me help you get you back on your feet? I'm just curious. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, they would have been out on the street. Mm-hmm. So the question, I think, I have thought a bit about this. And I think one of the questions is who would have been taking notice of them? Mm-hmm. They looked like beggars. I'm willing to, and this is my own chokhmah in terms of talking about this, because there's no rabbinic commentary on this at all, because there's no positive statement. What I'm commenting on is an absence of any hostility shown, because I think we would have found about that. So I think this goes back to the notion of treating the ger, the foreigner, in your midst. Now, I have a bit of a problem with a lot of the texts circulating around the Orthodox world right now that deliberately translate ger as convert. Mm-hmm. It means a foreigner. In these contexts, biblical contexts, it means a foreigner. And I think this goes back to the notion of treating a ger with a degree of tolerance. Mm-hmm. Maybe they may not be going out of their way, but nor are they throwing them out, and they would have been entitled to do that, especially with a Moavi woman coming in. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. So I want to ask you a slightly controversial question. Sure. We know that David is the descendant of Ruth. Mm-hmm. Do we think that would have caused any controversy today? You mentioned before.
Oh, yeah, there actually is discussion of David's ultimate descendants from Moab through Ruth. Mm-hmm. And I think this is one of the reasons that in the Midrash, the rabbis take great pains, and since we were talking about chesed, I didn't go into that whole side of the story. But there are loads and loads of discussions loads of discussions about the process of Ruth converting to Judaism, which begins after the moment, of course, when she comes into the city. So she is absolutely, totally a foreigner when she comes in. There's no discussion of her having taken up her first set of in-laws' religion. But there's a long process that they recount of her taking on the God of Israel when she married Boaz, and Boaz teaching it to her. So, and we are also thoroughly commanded to accept converts fully. Mm-hmm. You know, once it's done properly, we are expected to accept converts. And so Jews by choice, of which Ruth may have been one of the earlier ones. Mm-hmm. And so no, there's not a controversy about David because it's understood that Ruth converted.
Interesting. I want to go back to the conversation about chesed, because I feel like chesed is something that really is one of the defining components of community. Mm-hmm. And I know that I can speak to examples of chesed in my own life. I would love to hear from you how chesed, because this is obviously a thing you've thought about a lot. How has chesed played into your life?
Some very moving ways. I'm going to do my best not to get mawkish. My first husband, David, died of a rare spinal cord cancer shortly after his 52nd birthday, 10 years ago. And the whole process of his disease and the period around his passing was scattered for all the darkness and all the difficulty and pain. It was scattered with these like starlight moments of chesed. My community here is in Potomac is what kept me alive through the whole period. I had two very, very old friends from earlier days in different parts of California who flew out for a week at a time to run my household. These were my kids' virtual other mothers. They flew out to run my household and make sure everything kept moving for a week before his passing while he was in home hospice here, and for the Shiva week, and I think a little bit beyond. I mean, this was sheer chesed, and my shul community here was where it was my safe place. I mean, I rarely broke down in tears, except Shabbos morning in shul with my friends gathered around me, and everyone thought this was okay. It's just extraordinary chesed. So it's just unforgettable to me and most of our family. Try not to be mawkish about it.
I know. All right, then I'm going to end on a happy note, on a more uplifting note. What's your favorite dairy dessert for Shavuot?
Oy, oy, oy. Well, the trick is right now I shouldn't be having any of them.
No.
So
we lean into the holiday.
I have made a really luscious ricotta cheesecake that's going to get a topping of nectarines and blueberries.
Oh, beautiful.
And that's going to be really difficult to stay away from.
You might have to hide it from me after we're done here.
It's hidden behind 6 layers of other things in my upstairs fridge.
That sounds delightful. Do you have any last thoughts before we say goodbye?
We may have some other things.
Sure.
We have people who'd like to chime in a little bit.
Let's see.
After all our technical difficulties.
After all of our technical difficulties. Come back. I do not see the chat box. There we go.
Lovely.
Let's see. Would
anyone like to chime in and talk about chesed in their own lives or what they're making for Shavuos?
No, we have a shy crowd today. Oh, wait. No, I wanted to. No? Okay. Well, in that case, then, I want to wish everybody a Chag Sameach, and thank you for joining us. And Deborah, I hope that we can do this again.
Yes, I'll look forward.
Me too. I learned a lot. And I just want to say one more thing. I'm deeply appreciative. Your artwork is beautiful. I'm especially appreciative how much you highlight women's images in all of your artwork, because we live at a time where that is a challenging moment that's creeping into our mainstream publications as well. And I just want to say, Yasher Kochach.
And I also thought that the role of chesed right now in our lives
absolutely
was crucial.
Yes, should be uplifted and celebrated. And so I thank you for that. And I look forward to learning with you and from you again.
Lovely.
All right.
Look forward.